Welcome to Daily Life Connection. Thank you for joining me again today as we explore the character of God and what difference that makes in our lives. Today I want to talk about the God of surprise endings. All through the Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, God constantly is surprising us with how things turn out. Just for a few examples, we have Joseph, who ends up in prison, ignored, forgotten, despised, and he ends up being the ruler next to Pharaoh. A totally surprise ending. And his brothers who try to get rid of him and so on. What a surprise ending that is when they come to him not knowing even who he is, and then he reveals himself to them. Or Moses, brought up in Pharaoh's palace, a adopted son of the princess, and then he ends up out in the back desert, running from the law, having committed murder, and he's farming sheep out in the back end of nowhere, and he becomes the great deliverer of Israel. Surprise ending there for us. Paul, the apostle, uh, who persecuted the church and was so against the message of Jesus, the good news of Jesus, becomes the primary apostle of faith, spreading the good news of Christ and spending his energy and his life for that. A surprise ending. Or the story of the prodigal son. What a surprise ending that is to the story. Nobody expected the father to welcome him and celebrate him. How about the parable of the workers in the vineyard? Some hired at 8 in the morning, some noon, some late afternoon, and they all get paid the same. Totally surprise ending. So this is a really simple one, but God is a God of surprise endings. I think what that means for you and I is simply this: never assume that the circumstance you're in is the end, or that it will determine how things turn out. Because God is a God of surprise endings. And we may be in a situation we don't see any way out of it. We don't see how it ever could be corrected or changed or transformed. Just hang on. In Isaiah, he talks about this is our God. We've waited for him, and he's delivered us. Wait for God, because he's a God of surprise endings. Sometimes we try to figure things out. Well, if I did this or if God did that, I'll pray and ask God to do this. Sometimes we think that we have to kind of direct the play. We have to decide who's on stage and what the next character should do in order to produce the outcome that we think ought to happen. But our problem is we think so small. God said, my ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. They're higher than your thoughts. They're bigger than your thoughts. I'm a God who thinks in surprise endings. And the reality is, it's wonderful to just wait and trust God. It's hard. It's really hard sometimes when we want to see action, we want to see deliverance, we want to see healing, or whatever it may be. But trusting that God has a surprise ending. And of course, the great surprise ending is death isn't the end. That death, which we think of it being the end of all, is simply the very beginning of everything, the beginning of new life, the beginning of resurrection and restoration and glory and perfection. And yeah, like the God of surprise endings. I love that about our God. So I encourage you to just think about that today. And whatever situations you may find yourself in that seem to be going downhill, that seem to be dark, that seems like there's no light at the end of that tunnel, trust God to bring about surprise endings in your situation and in your life. Begin to thank Him for it even now, even when you don't see them, even when there's no evidence that they're going to come to pass. Begin thanking Him and trust. It's Job really in the middle of the book when Job, what a surprise ending that one has. Uh, Job going, even if he killed me, I'd still trust him. I trust him. I trust him because he's a God who is a God of surprise endings. Well, let's think about that today. We'll talk again tomorrow. God bless.